Hey everyone, and welcome back to the English Singlish. I'm Sophia.
And I'm James. Thanks for tuning in to another episode where we dive deep into all things English language learning.
Today we're tackling a really interesting and honestly quite controversial topic that many of our listeners have been asking about. We're going to discuss Asian slangs and whether they're actually destroying our English.
Right, exactly. And I have to say, this is such a loaded question because language is so personal and cultural.
Absolutely. So let's start by talking about what we're actually referring to when we say Asian slangs. James, you've spent some time in Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah, I have. And it's fascinating how English has evolved in different Asian countries. Take Singlish in Singapore, for example. You'll hear phrases like can la instead of yes, that's possible, or wah, so syok, which means wow, that's so good.
And then there's Manglish in Malaysia, which is similar but has its own unique flavor. They might say, I go there already, instead of I went there, or you want or not, instead of do you want it or not.
Exactly. And in Thailand, you'll often hear Thai speakers mixing English with Thai sentence structures, like saying, I very like this song instead of I really like this song.
Right. Now, here's the thing. These aren't necessarily wrong. They're actually legitimate varieties of English that have developed naturally in these communities. But the question our listeners are asking is whether using these forms might limit them in certain situations.
You know, there's also Japanese English or Janglish, where you might hear I have a convenience instead of it's convenient for me, or the famous let's challenge, meaning let's try our best. These direct translations create such unique expressions that carry cultural meaning.
And don't forget about Indian English. I love how they say, do the needful, which means do what needs to be done. Or when they ask, what's your good name, instead of just, what's your name? It's actually quite charming and shows cultural politeness being woven into the language.
And let me tell you about Indonesian English. They often say, we will rubber time this meeting, which means the meeting will start flexibly, or don't mention it la, combining Indonesian casual speech with English. It's this beautiful blend of cultures that shows how language adapts to local communication styles. That's such an important distinction. And honestly, I think the answer is it depends on your goals. If you're planning to travel internationally or work in a global company, understanding and being able to use standard English can definitely open more doors.
Oh, absolutely. And in the Philippines, you have Filipino English or Pinoy English, where they might say, open the light instead of turn on the light. Or, I'll just comfort room, meaning I'll just go to the bathroom. It comes from direct translation from Filipino. Absolutely. Let's talk about some real benefits. When I was traveling through Europe last year, speaking standard English made communication so much smoother. Everyone could understand me easily, whether I was in Germany, France, or Italy.
Right. And then there's Hong Kong English, which has been heavily influenced by Cantonese. They might say add oil instead of good luck or keep trying. It's directly translated from the Cantonese phrase ga yao. You'll also hear red packet instead of the more internationally recognized envelope for monetary gifts.
Yeah, that's so true. And there's actually research backing this up. A study by the British Council found that standard English is more universally understood across different countries and cultures.
You know what's fascinating, Sophia? The origins of these slangs tell such interesting stories. Take law in Singlish. It actually comes from Hokkien and Cantonese, where it's used as a sentence particle to add emphasis or familiarity. So when Singaporeans say can law, they're not just speaking English, they're carrying forward centuries of Chinese linguistic tradition.
Right, and from a professional standpoint, standard English is often expected in international business settings. It's not about one form being better than another, it's about clarity and universal understanding.
That's so true. And shok that you mentioned earlier, that comes from Punjabi originally, meaning comfort or bliss. It shows how multilingual Singapore really is. Malaysian law has similar roots, but they also use meh, which is like asking really or expressing doubt. These particles add so much emotional nuance that standard English question tags like isn't it can't quite capture.
Exactly. I remember reading a Harvard Business Review article that mentioned how clear, standardized communication can prevent misunderstandings in multicultural work environments.
I have to share a personal story here. When I first moved to Singapore for work, I was so confused in meetings. My colleague would say, "We discussed this issue until like that, la." And I had no idea what until like that meant. Turns out it means we'll discuss it extensively or until we reach a conclusion. Once I understood the cultural context, it actually made perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. And there's another aspect too, confidence. When you know you can communicate in a way that anyone, anywhere in the world can understand, it boosts your confidence in international settings. Oh my gosh, I can totally relate. I remember when I was in Mumbai, a colleague told me to revert back on an email. And I was like, revert back to what? I didn't realize that in Indian English, revert just means reply. And everyone kept saying they were out of station instead of out of town. It took me weeks to decode the workplace vocabulary.
Oh, definitely. But here's what I want our listeners to understand. Learning standard English doesn't mean abandoning your local variety. You can be multilingual in different forms of English too.
That's such a great point, James. It's about code switching, knowing when to use which variety. You might speak Singlish with your friends in Singapore, but switch to standard English in a job interview or international conference.
Exactly. And research from linguistics professors at the National University of Singapore actually shows that bilingual speakers who can code switch effectively have cognitive advantages.
Right, right. So, what are some practical ways our listeners can strengthen their standard English while still appreciating their local varieties?
Great question. I'd say start by consuming international media. Watch BBC News, listen to podcasts from different English speaking countries, read international newspapers online.
hmm And practice writing in standard English, even if it's just journaling or commenting on international forums. The more you practice, the more natural it becomes.
And here's something interesting. A study from Cambridge University found that people who master standard English often report feeling more confident in academic and professional settings, not because local varieties are wrong, but because standard English gives them more options.
Yeah, it's all about having tools in your toolkit. And honestly, I think there's something quite elegant and sophisticated about being able to communicate clearly across different cultures and contexts.
Speaking of professional settings, let me share some specific research I came across. A 2019 study by McKinsey Global Institute found that professionals who can code switch between local varieties and standard English actually earn about 15% more on average than those who only use one variety. It's not about superiority, it's about adaptability.
Absolutely. It's not about losing your identity, it's about expanding your communicative repertoire.
That's incredible data. And think about specific situations. If you're presenting to a board with executives from London, New York, Sydney, and Tokyo, using standard English ensures everyone follows your presentation equally. But if you're building rapport with local clients in Singapore, switching to some Singlish expressions can actually help you connect better and show cultural awareness. Before we move to our final thoughts, I'm really curious, have any of our listeners ever experienced awkward moments because of language variety differences? Maybe you used a local expression in an international meeting, or someone didn't understand your regional slang. We'd love to hear these stories because they help all of us learn.
So, to wrap up our main discussion, Asian slangs aren't destroying English. They're part of English's beautiful evolution. But mastering standard English alongside your local variety can definitely open more doors globally.
Yes, and specifically, we want to know which local English expressions from your country do you think foreigners find most confusing? And on the flip side, which standard English phrases did you have to learn for professional situations? Your experiences could really help other listeners navigate these situations better.
Exactly. Here's another example, writing emails. If I'm emailing an international supplier, I'll write, "Please let me know if you need any additional information." But if I'm texting my Malaysian colleague, I might write, "Need anything else or not?" It's all about reading the room and adapting your communication style to your audience.
Exactly right. And now we want to hear from you. We're really curious about your experiences with local slangs and standard English.
There's actually more fascinating research on this. The Journal of Multilingual Communication published a study showing that in multinational teams, miscommunication decreased by 34% when team members used standard English in formal contexts. But here's the interesting part. Team bonding and creativity actually increased when they were allowed to use local varieties in informal brainstorming.
Yes. Tell us, what local English varieties do you use in your country? Have you ever found yourself switching between local slang and standard English? What challenges have you faced and what benefits have you discovered?
That totally matches my experience. I remember during my time at a tech startup in Bangalore, we had team members from 6 different countries. During our formal client presentations, everyone used standard English, and it was crystal clear. But during our Pizza Friday brainstorming, the room came alive when people started mixing in their local expressions. The Indian developers would say, "It's pretty buggy, yar," and the Malaysian designer would go, "Wow, this interface very chantik." It actually sparked more creative ideas.
We'd love to feature your stories in our next episode. You can reach us through our social media channels or send us an email. And if you're learning English, we want to hear about your journey with different varieties too. Let's get really practical here. When should you definitely use standard English? Job interviews with international companies, academic conferences, writing research papers, customer service with global clients, and any formal documentation that might be shared internationally. These are contexts where clarity and universal understanding are paramount.
Before we sign off, if you enjoyed today's episode, please give us a like, subscribe to our podcast, and share it with anyone who might find it helpful. Your support really helps us reach more English learners around the world. All right.
Thanks for joining us today on the English Syndicate. I'm James.
And I'm Sophia. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing. Bye!